Hi, you've reached Call Your Publicist, your go-to source for PR moves, media moments, and brand strategies that keep businesses and people in the headlines for the right reasons. I'm one of your hosts, Jenna Guarneri, CEO and founder of JMG Public Relations.
And I'm your co-host, Alexandra Anastasio. Let's start talking. Welcome back to Call Your Publicist. Today we're talking to Richard Ross, CEO of Quinn Residences, a build-to-rent company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to talk to Richard not only about the real estate market, about build-to-rent, but we're going to learn a little bit about Richard himself, the CEO and entrepreneur.
Awesome. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to see you today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Great, absolutely. And the last time I saw you was in Atlanta at your offices. That's where Quinn Residences is headquartered. And I know you switched offices, right? And you expanded a bit. How did that go?
Yes, we expanded quite a bit. So we're now in our new digs.
Nice. I can't wait to see it. And you know I love Atlanta.
Yeah, well, come on down. I would wait till the fall. Don't come in August.
I heard it's hot.
I was going to say, I'm assuming it's very hot, like Florida heat weather right now.
Yeah, or maybe some people don't realize worse because we're way inland. You don't get any sort of breeze here. So it can be stifling in August, but we make up for it in the fall and the spring.
Awesome. Well, can't wait. All right, so the fall I'll be there again for sure.
On your list.
On my list. And since our viewers are here, we're going to dive into more about Quinn and more about your background. But briefly, can you share, just for people who don't know about build-to-rent communities, can you briefly explain what the business model is like?
Sure. It's a relatively new concept in housing, I would say. Say the last 10 years, although really has gotten popular in the last 5, which is when we were founded just over 5.5 years ago. So what we do is we build entire communities for rent. Let's take an example of a suburban subdivision, whether you're in the Southeast, the Northeast, a 300 home subdivision, starter homes typically, where every home is for rent. So we have a clubhouse, whether that's a pool, playground, dog park, and these are all starter homes. So brand new 3 and 4 bedroom homes, and every home is for rent and professionally managed.
Fantastic. And I know, so you have an incredible background and an impressive journey. So you've been in multiple industries. So your father hasn't even been in real estate, but you were in accounting before this. So what was the catalyst that led you to follow in your father's footsteps?
So interesting story. Yes, my father was a home builder in South Florida in the late 50s, right? Which is when I was born. And then did really well and then didn't, just sort of the vagaries of the real estate business. So during a recession, right, the oil embargo of 72, he had overextended himself as successful real estate folks do. It's pretty well known that happens. And so I was an adolescent then, right, 15, 16 years old, and saw what happened to my father when he got the downside of the real estate cycle, and decided that I wanted to go into a profession, which is why I went into accounting. I did accounting for about 10 years. And then something happened. I don't know if the DNA kicked in or I know what happened. Billing hours is a great living. And whether you're a physician or an accountant or a lawyer, but it's not a way to create wealth. And so either the DNA kicked in, and also I said, billing hours is really great. My kids were young. I wanted to spend more time at home. And so then I guess the entrepreneur DNA kicked in, and I, went out on my own.
Yeah. And I know too, listen, as an entrepreneur, there's more flexibility for your scheduling, especially with young kids. I imagine that seemed to be, you're able to create more of a work-life balance for yourself.
Correct. Like. And they were 7 and 9 then. So that was, the formative years, if you will.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's not something that you want to miss out on. So I have to ask, your father was a home builder. You started in accounting, but I want to take it back a little bit. So, when we're kids, we all kind of have this dream, like this is what we want to be when we grow up. Sometimes we follow that path. Other times we don't. So I'd love to ask you, what was your vision when you were a young kid?
Sure. So maybe a little stereotypical, but I'm just going to say at 9 years old, I wanted to be an airline pilot, right? I wanted to fly airline planes, and actually looked into when I was early teens taking flying lessons. Never
Wow.
materialized, never followed up on it, but that was
Bold.
the dream as a little boy.
Okay. That's a big dream because I don't know if I know anyone that wanted to be, you hear cops, firemen, that I think is more standard, but pilot, that's
I don't know.
interesting.
I'm afraed to fly, so I don't want to get on the plane. So
Yeah. Well, there
power
you go.
to you that you wanted to fly it.
But I'm dying to know, since then, have you ever taken a pilot?
No, I didn't. I grew up in South Florida. As I mentioned, that's where my father was building
Mhm.
homes. So I was a sailor from a young age, 8 years old, and
Okay.
did end up buying a sailboat in my 50s and living on a sailboat for a year, sort of as a sabbatical.
Wow.
So
Oh, we'll have to talk about that. I love the boating life. One of these days, you and I are going to have to chat more about that.
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, there's something that's also freeing because they say as entrepreneurs it's great to travel, so that
Right.
way you get more inspiration, more motivation, and you get fresh ideas when you come back. Do you feel that way when you're on the water? Because I feel like it's so freeing when you're out there.
Yeah, whether it's on the water, as you said, or traveling, I
Mm-hmm.
do believe in taking extended breaks from whatever it is that we do that do
like
for a living, so that we can recharge, clear the head, and I mean when I mean take a break, it's difficult these days, but like put the
Yeah.
phone down, turn off
Yeah.
the email, and really recharge.
Is there a way you find that you need to do that? Like, do you set blocks of time and you say, I'm 2 weeks, I'm taking off, that's it? How do you go about making sure you're
Right.
accountable for that?
So my preference is to do longer stints. So my vacation time is usually 3 weeks, and I do try and disconnect from the office. And obviously, I'm able to do that. And then in between, so that's an annual thing. I think 3 weeks, once a year, and then 2 hours a week, unplugged, if you will, and maybe a little bit each day in the morning for me. So
I think those are good practices. I feel like more people should employ those, myself included. But I
well,
think
it's
that
interesting. I require my employees. We have 100 folks who work here now, and I require them to take their vacation. A lot of people, let's say you get 2 weeks vacation and you end up at the end of the year and you've taken
Right.
4 days. I mean, typically that's particularly with young people and professionals. So I try and force them, if you will, like get out of here.
That's fantastic. And that then shows, I mean, workplace culture,
Yep.
employee culture seems to be important to you then if that's something that you want them to have, that work-life balance.
Absolutely, it's critical because they're better employees, right? Just because of that. So
100%. We say the same thing every day too. We
Yep.
want to make sure no one's burnt out. You come back to work, you're fresh, you're ready to go.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think too, that's probably part of being an entrepreneur or probably running a business or running a company is knowing how to, we talk about this all the time, like, I don't want to say manage your employees, but really help guide them, almost like mentors, if that makes sense. So I think everybody has them. Did you, when you were growing up or through your career, were there certain people besides your father? Because obviously he had to have, a big impact on your life in that respect. Any mentors for you, people that helped guide you to get to where you are today?
So it's interesting. I'm going to use, yes, I had several, I would say, people who had confidence in me, maybe when I didn't. But there was a negative mentor, like someone who, the only job I was ever terminated from in my entire career was a big national accounting firm and really got great experience. This was right out of school. So my first real professional job. And this was an HR person who called me in and told me I didn't fit the mold. My believe it or not, my shirts were too dark to be.
Oh, wow.
I would have been fired from day one.
That's a new one. Your color
And I just remember, plus the other thing is I had gotten very good performance reviews during that 2 years that I was there. So it just didn't sit right with me. And the lesson I learned is, one, to be direct and forthright with anybody, and that just drove me to be more, aggressive and have faith in what I was doing. And that's when I left and started. That was my first entrepreneurial journey. I left the big firm and went and hung shingle, literally, with a buddy.
Wow.
And so that was sort of the start of being in my own business.
Wow. Was that the catalyst to say, I'm going to go out and do my own thing? Or were you kind of forced into that and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm an entrepreneur, let me continue this? Like, Did you always have that entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, I think my father, had it. Again, I did the profession for the reasons we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it was a mixture of both. And then once I did it and grew that business, right, two of us started. And I think when I sold it and got back into real estate, when my kids were of an age where I wanted to be home more, um, we were 30 people, four partners, so we had that business had grown, and that sort of cemented the I want to do this entrepreneurial thing on my own.
And I was going to say too, I think mentors, they don't always have to be, when we think about them, we think about them as like these positive influences, which they should be. But I think when you have those experiences, like you just explained, those help us too, because it helps you see what not to do or how you don't want to run something, right? Like I'm sure you take those lessons and you implement them for
Yeah,
yourself in a
absolutely. And
different way.
on the positive side, right, there were a few people who, I'll give you an example. I found myself at a company that was public, and I was the CFO, or actually I was a consultant and then became the CFO. And when they asked me to be the CFO, I was an entrepreneur. I was like, no, I kind of like being self-employed and being my own boss. And I talked to I have sort of a personal board of directors, if you will, two or three people that I run things by and sort of career business wise. And one of my good friends, I asked him, I said, look, they offered me this position. And he says, if you can be the CFO of a public company, you should take it. And so obviously that was a catalyst to another step in my career.
And I think too that also then makes sense of why you have such a great employee culture at Quinn Residences and why that was important. It's important for your employees to take vacation because you saw things that were wrong and now you want to make it right by other people too.
Yeah, it's that for sure. And it's not just the vacation, it's sort of, a culture of, I would say, inclusiveness and diversity, and not your typical, DEI, which is obviously very hot in the press these days. But I'm talking more. Um, you don't want to create a culture or a group of employees that's all yes people or all just like me. So in every business I've built, and I've built a few, I've endeavored to have diversity in culture, backgrounds, education, cultural, that kind of thing. Because obviously, I don't know everything, and having that breadth of experience and background really helps, particularly in the business we're in now, which is housing people.
I love that you pinpointed that it's important to have people around you that aren't yesers because I think there's a culture and hopefully it no longer exists, but I'm sure it still does. Of that leader that just instills fear and just wants everyone to agree
Right.
and that they have the best idea. But I think it takes a really strong leader to be able to say, I'm not the smartest person in the room, and that's okay. And this is why we have such great team members and we are a great company because they're all included into why we're so great.
Right.
They're talented individuals. And it almost takes away, you have to take away that ego to be able to realize that everyone in the room, it contributes to the team as a whole for a reason. And it's not a success without them.
Yeah, and look, in the long run, I mean, I've been doing this now 40 years. Um, it creates better value in the company. Certainly in the long run. People might not think so in the short run, but my experience has taught me in the long run, it's better value for the investors, better value for the employees, and of course for myself.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I wanted to jump in a little bit into real estate because I am curious. When you left accounting, you went into real estate. Was it right into the build to rent market? Like, how did you, because build to rent, I know you said it's like this new concept, which I think is fantastic. And you talk a lot about like the American dream. So I kind of want to dive into that. But I first want to know when you transitioned to real estate.
So I sold the accounting firm and
Right.
Wanted to spend more time at home, and found myself through, again, a contact I had made, a friend I had made, a mentor, actually at the big accounting firm who was a very positive influence. And he led me to a company in the multifamily, so apartment business. This is early 90s when what they call Class A garden style apartments were being generated or in their germination. And so I went and helped the company go public in that business here in Atlanta. And that company is still in existence today. So I spent 2 years there and learned basically the multifamily, so the apartment business. Um, and then went on to another company in grocery anchored retail, so shopping centers, if you will. And that was sort of the genesis of my experience in housing, and then obviously in retail.
Okay. Well, I know you talk a lot about, through your thought leadership, we talk about this American dream and how traditionally, right, it's centered around this buying a home, which I think is ingrained in a lot of people, but the older generation. But now, as times are changing, I don't think that American dream really has to be you have to buy a home, right? Because now you're seeing the rise of the build to rent model, and it's not just people renting because they have to rent, they want to rent, right? So I think we're kind of redefining, or I should say the build to rent models redefining that dream for like today's generation. Would you agree? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a boomer, right? I'm the tail end of the baby boomer, and the script was go to college, find a partner, get married, have a child, buy a house, live in that house for 30 years, sell the house, move to Florida.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm not that was kind of the script, right?
Yeah,
or
right.
move into a retirement home, and that worked for many, many millions of people, right? If you bought a home, and I'm just saying in the 70s or 80s, and you held it for 30 years, you did really well. What we've learned in this business is that is not necessarily, and I have daughters who are now in their mid 30s, and that's not necessarily what people want today. They want flexibility, right? So let's say I want to live in Atlanta in a nice home, and we deal in 3 and 4 bedroom homes, fenced backyard, 2-car garage kind of stuff. But in 3 years, I might need to move to Denver or Phoenix or New Jersey. And so I don't want to be tied to that particular home for the next 30 years. I guess the other part of that is the no maintenance lifestyle, meaning what we offer is you don't have to mow the lawn. If the toilet gets stopped up, we send somebody there by the end of the day to unstop it. So there's none of that, of the headaches of home ownership, if you will. And there's also the affordability factor.
Yep.
Because of the increase in mortgage rates and the increase in home prices over the last, really since the pandemic, it's really hard to be able to afford a home. Our homes typically on a monthly basis are, depending on where it is, anywhere between 40 and 50% cheaper on a monthly basis to rent one of our homes than to own our home. Same exact home, same location, same home. It's apples to apples, if you will. And so that, coupled with the maintenance-free lifestyle and the flexibility, are opportunities for people to think about the American dream, if you will, differently. And look, there are many other ways to create wealth now, not just buying a house. I'm not sure that works anymore. If we have a housing crisis again, maybe it does because prices go down. But there's so many more opportunities, whether it's the stock market, Bitcoin, right, crypto, that kind of stuff. So there's many other options to create wealth other than just owning your house.
Yeah. And I love that you're really at the forefront of this, because there's something so innovative about changing the idea of, what we talked about is that having to purchase a home and following that trajectory of that life. But it really lends well to also this new generation post-COVID of, the remote work.
Right.
People just want to now pick up and work from anywhere. So they work from the same company. It could be in New York, it could be in Atlanta, but this now allows them flexibility to try a new place and still keep the same job. Right. There's something that's really nice about moving around and exploring the world. And the built to rent model lends to that.
And typically, right, so we're 3 and 4 bedroom homes. Typically, though, one of those bedrooms is, as you say, an office, is like a remote office, the smallest.
Makes sense.
And then we do have a good number of empty nesters in our homes, meaning someone who has owned the home for 30 years, sold it, and for whatever reason, typically it's they want the no maintenance lifestyle. They're tired of mowing the lawn and dealing with the roof leaking or whatever. And they want to be near family, typically grandchildren. Like they don't want to live with the grandchildren, but if they're 5 miles away or 10 miles away,
a couple blocks away.
yeah, that's a really ideal situation. And again, those children may be moving around for jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
So, again, it's flexibility. I mean, I will tell you, in this country, it's interesting. Home ownership, and this has been really since World War II, has been about 2/3 of the population own their homes and 1/3 rents. That's been true, as I said, 50 years. It changes maybe a point or two, percentage or two every year, but not that much. In Europe, it's about 50%.
That's interesting.
Well, because land's so expensive. I mean, so
Right.
again, I think this country is going to move more. It'll take time. It might take 20, 30 years, but maybe that rental percentage goes to 40%, which, by the way, is a big shift. So I think there is a propensity going forward for people to be renters by choice.
But what I think is great about the build to rent model too, and what you guys are doing, is that when you would think about renting, typically or for me, I would think it used to be, I have to live in where we are in New York, where I am specifically, there aren't a lot of apartment buildings. So you have to live in like the side of somebody's house or in somebody's basement apartment, or it was in like an apartment building. Now, you can rent, but you can have that home. You can have the access to that pool. You can have, the 3 to 4 bedrooms, where typically here, if you're renting, you can get 2 bedrooms, but it's not as easy, let's say, as, if you have a home. You have all those, high-end amenities. You have the sustainability. Like, I just think that model should start growing in other places. Like, I know where you guys are located. You have in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina. Like, where will the build to rent model continue to grow? Like, I wish it was here in like New York and New Jersey,
like the metropolitan cities.
Like closer
here.
Yeah.
So again, it's difficult in a high density city like New York, New Jersey, San Francisco, LA, just because land is scarce, right?
Right.
But in every other community, this business started, believe it or not, in the Southwest. Like Phoenix was sort of the genesis, and then it moved east, and those were 1 and 2 bedroom, what we would call villas or horizontal apartments, so a 1 or 2 bedroom. What we do, the 3 and 4 bedroom, really didn't catch on until later in the decade, and so it's currently prevalent in the Southeast, in the Southwest, Texas. The Midwest is now getting more and more attractive. So I'm talking like Indianapolis, Cleveland, St. Louis. In a denser city like New York or Brooklyn, it's really difficult. Having said that, there are pockets where you can maybe convert a building, whether it's a former office building, into rentals. I will tell you that, again, this has been true since World War II. About a third of the people rent. Of the rental units in this country, 95% are mom and pop owners. So it's somebody who, maybe bought their first home and upsized, and so they're renting that home, or they have 4 units in Brooklyn, I'm making this up, or in New Jersey, and that's great. But they're not professional managers or owners, and they don't have the capital. So if the roof needs replacing, they're stretched, and so they can't. That's why you get a lot of maintenance issues with mom and pop owners. So what happened in the apartment business in the 90s, early 90s to late 90s, is professional owners began to build brand new apartments, and today those professional owners own about half the apartments in this country. Wow. About 50%. In build to rent or single family rentals, it's still about 3 to 5% are owned by what we would call professional managers and owners. That I see coming to 50% in the next, let's say, decade. So it will continue to get more popular. It will continue to fill in areas of the country where it makes sense. It's just really hard in high density urban areas to you make that model work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to chat a little bit about, because you've obviously are very good at what you do, and you've created such a beautiful business. what qualities do you look for, say, for your executive team, to help you create and sustain that business?
So as I said earlier, it's people who are willing to, I would say, challenge the status quo. Again, I'm certainly not always right, and I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. So a diversity of opinions and backgrounds. Um, and I will tell you, again, I've been doing this a while. When you hire someone, I say this a lot, you're basically rolling the dice. Like, you can interview, you can test, you can do all the things that we all do to, particularly at a senior level. You really don't know until
Right.
that person's been there. So I would say, um, when I make a strategic hire and I go with my gut, right, in the interview process, I've learned when you don't go with your gut, like you get a no and you don't know why it's a no and everybody else thinks it's a yes, you really got to trust that it's a no. I've learned that lesson. So does it feel right? And then when you hire and it's not a great hire, and it's not a great hire, typically it takes less than 90 days. You really need to move on quickly rather than try and spend a lot of time and money fixing something that
Mm-hmm.
is not going to be fixed. So I would say those are key things. And then giving people the tools and the responsibility to do their jobs and letting them do it is probably the biggest thing. Like, if I hire somebody to manage one of our communities, I don't go behind them and say, did you change the air conditioner filter? Or, why did you rent to Bill and Susie? I give them the responsibility. I give them the tools they need to do their job, and I kind of let them do it.
Yeah, there's the awareness as a leader not to micromanage and to allow people, even though you might have done it a little differently, you have to allow them their space to be able to do it their way. And at the end of the day, it's about completing it, not necessarily the way you wanted it, as long as it's completed and it's done well.
Correct.
Well,
and let, if they're going to fail, let them fail at least, once or twice, because that's how we all learn.
Right, of course.
Definitely. Well, and that's that trust factor, right? You're placing your trust in that employee, that person, to get that job done. And like you said, it might not be the way you would have done it, but maybe there's a different way, and maybe that way makes a little more sense. You just don't know.
Absolutely.
What's something you would say would surprise people about your leadership style? Is there anything like that you think people have said, like, oh, I'm, like other leaders like look to you and say, wow, I never thought about doing it like that. But
good idea.
That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So something that happened recently, and I did do a little bit of a talk about this on one of your talks that you arranged for me, and this is letting people move on.
Yes, that was a great article, by the way.
That does surprise people. Like, he was great. Like, why would you let him go? Or she was amazing. Like, why would you let her move on? And as we talked about in that, you can't hold things so tight to the vest because that stifles people's personal growth and career growth. And I've learned again that letting people sort of fly the coop, it's just like children, right? When your children are of a certain age, you can no longer sort of micromanage their lives. I know people try, but at some point between 18 and 21, like, they need to fly the coop. The same is true with employees, particularly ones that are really good and they want to try something else. And so I know what happens a lot is Sue comes into the office and says, hey, I want to take a job doing this. And they've been here 3 years, wonderful employee. And there's a lot of, well, let me match that offer. What can we do to keep you to stay? And my experience has been, it's better to say, how can we support you, going forward, particularly if they're willing to do an orderly transition kind of thing. And that's been really good. I mean, I will tell you, in my career, I have this saying, don't never burn a bridge.
Yep.
No, of course.
That's a reason never to burn a bridge. I have several examples of where, had I burned a bridge, things would not have turned out well. So
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, when you were telling that story, I was thinking to myself, you never know when those people will come back, or you may find yourself in a situation with them. So it's always best to support and let them, whatever it is they're looking to do, it may still be in that same industry, and you never know when your paths will cross again. So I
Sure.
think
And
that's
this
very
example
smart.
we're talking about, he went to a customer. Well, we're a customer. He went to a vendor, if you will, a
Right.
home builder that we pay to build homes for us. And yeah, he's been there now, over a year and a half. And, having him there has really been helpful for us as his customer. So
Now I'm curious, and this could be that's a good parlay, is that what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur?
So I'm going to go back to the don't burn bridges. This story I related earlier about, I was up for the CFO job I took, and then they asked me to be the CEO, and I was up for the CEO job. And unbeknownst to me, three things happened. One of the board members on the board, who hires that particular position, was friends with a lawyer that I knew 20 years ago. And he knew that I knew this lawyer. So he called this lawyer and said, "Who's this guy, Richard?" And the lawyer said, "He's a good guy." Another guy went to church. Another board member went to church with someone that I knew from my business days 20 years prior. And he said, "Who is this Richard guy?" He said, "He's a good guy." And then one of the employees, a senior member of the company he was going to work for me, but he was a C-suite person. And he knew somebody that I had worked with 15 years ago. And he called his friend and said, "Who's this guy, Richard?" And he's all right. So all those boxes got checked, and I ended up getting the job. If any of those three boxes didn't get checked, I wouldn't have gotten the job, and I wouldn't have known why. Because, they're not going to call and say, "Hey, I trashed you," whatever.
Right.
So long-winded way of saying, you just never know. And those were things that happened 15, 20 years ago. And unbeknownst to me, so that's why you don't burn a bridge.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, one last question for you. So we talk a lot about legacy as entrepreneurs. How do you define legacy? And how does that shape your decisions in your entrepreneurial?
So, for me, legacy would mean leaving something better than you found it. Like, I don't need my name on, a monument or a plaque or on some building. It's more, did we do something that made a difference? Whether that's socially, and I believe in Quinn, in the iteration of Quinn where we are, it's a new industry. It's solving what's a huge crisis in this country about housing. There's just a shortage of housing. I don't care where it is. And this is a sort of new and innovative way. So there's that legacy. We helped start a new way for people to live. And then on the people side, it's, did we give young people an opportunity to start their career, learn something new, and be better employees, but also better people. So I would say that's the part of the legacy. If I can, when I go off into the sunset, so to speak, probably not to Florida,
But on your boat.
but yeah, or maybe on another boat, then that would be a legacy that I would be very, very proud of.
That's beautiful.
I like that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for the conversation today. So if somebody's looking for a new community built to rent, where can they find one from Quinn Residences?
live-quinn.com.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank
Richard.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
This was awesome. Thank you, Richard.